Prediction! At the end of this episode, I will have recreated a recipe for cherry jelly from the great prognosticator, Nostradamus. Not much of a prediction, seeing as I'm the one doing it, but nonetheless. So thank you to Babbel for sponsoring this video as we recreate Nostradamus's cherry jelly, this time on Tasting History. Now we know Nostradamus today mostly for his vague and cryptic predictions of the future, but did you know he also had a penchant for the culinary arts? In his 1552 treatise Traité de Fardements et Confiture, or Treatise on Makeup and Jam, he gives us two recipes for cherry jelly, one which he says is very good and could even be served to a prince, but we're going to make the second, which is another method of making a jelly from cherries which is more delicate and expensive than the previous one and for use only by the nobility. Take 2 pounds of the best sugar, pound it and put it into a pan. Next, take 6, 7, or 8 pounds of cherries, remove the stalks, squeeze them with your clean hands, and put them in the pan with the sugar. Place on the fire to boil until half. When they are so boiled, strain them through a tight, clean linen cloth, squeezing them. Take what has come out and boil in another pan on a low fire. You will know when it is ready if you allow a drop to fall on a marble slab. It should remain a stiff round drop. The drop will be as vermilion as a fine claret wine. Put it into small jars of glass, and when cooled, you will have a type of dark jelly, of which it would be impossible to find a more beautiful, better, or more excellent example. He's very proud of this jelly. He actually goes on for quite some time after this about how wonderful the jelly is, and if you travel the entire world, you won't find a better recipe. Though there were some who disagreed with him, saying that it was too simple and not worth their time.
But you're not being jelly.
Oh, but they were so being jelly. He says, "There are some who gossip, for they are unable to imitate me in this manner. They are accustomed to speak evil of people and say there is no great skill involved. I admit it, not everyone can do this. Well, I am not jelly, and I do believe that I can do this, so haters, back off." Now, there are many translations of this work, and some are kind of weird and just frankly wrong, because it was translated into other languages, and then translations were made of those translations, and so on and so forth, so that several years down the line, you got ones that were really weird, like instead of rose, it says red, black orchids. Totally different. But it is cool to see how languages, kind of change and whatnot. And if you are a lover of language, like I am, then you should check out Babbel, our sponsor for today. Now lately, I have been using Babbel to learn Spanish via their lessons and the great little games that they have, which really help me to actually remember things. But I've also been using it as a refresher on the French that I took in high school and college. And there's actually a whole thing on the app for refreshing a language that you've already studied.
Faire de la danse.
Faire de la danse. I did it! One of my favorite features, though, are the podcasts that come along with it. I just finished listening to a podcast called A Tunisian Mustache and a Little Monkey. How could you not click on that? So cute. They really help with the pronunciation and the grammar. It's also great because most of the podcasts and the lessons are around 10 minutes, so you don't have to devote an entire chunk of time. You can kind of parse it out throughout the day. So if you want to start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks, or if you just want to brush up on those high school French classes, then click the link in the description for 65% off. Now, despite what Destiny's Child may say, I do think I'm ready for this jelly. So what you'll need for this recipe is 3.5 pounds or 1.5 kilograms of cherries. Now, Nostradamus actually tells us which type of cherry to use, and those are Amarena cherries from Italy. They're a small, dark, sour cherry that are really wonderful, but they're very hard to get fresh. I've only ever seen them here in the States in kind of a syrup, so you don't want to use those. Instead, if you can find a different sour cherry, that's the way to go. They can be very expensive, so if you want to use a different cherry, that's fine too. Frankly, all cherries are expensive though. And 1 pound or 450 grams of sugar. Now I'm making half of Nostradamus's recipe because I don't need that much jelly, but if you want the full amount, just double what I said. So first add the sugar to a pot, and then take the cherries and squish them with your hands and drop them into the sugar, pits and all. Except for the stems, you should take those off. Now be very careful as you're doing this because the cherry juice squirts and gets absolutely everywhere. So wear an apron and don't wear a white shirt that you really love because it will be ruined and you will be sad. Also, it gets everywhere, so kind of try do it down in the bowl. Once you've mashed all the cherries, set the pot over a medium heat and bring it to a simmer. Let it simmer for about 30 to 40 minutes or until it's reduced by about half. Then remove the pot from the heat and let it cool for a little bit. You want it still warm when you do this next part, but your hands are going to be in there. In fact, if you have gloves, all the better, because you'll scald your hands if it's too hot. So put the cherries in a tight cloth. Pudding cloth or calico is perfect for this. Don't use cheesecloth. It's just gonna go right through. Not good. And then over a bowl, squeeze as much liquid as you can from the cherries. I did it in 2 batches because of the amount of cherries, and I suggest you do the same. Once you've squeezed all you can discard the pits, or for our UK friends, the stones. Though actually the word that Nostradamus used could be translated as bones, which is pretty cool. The bones of the cherry. Once you have all of the juice, put it into another pot and set it over a low flame. You just want it to kind of steam. And it's going to take about 35 to 40 minutes, and to test it, you can take a drop, as he says, and put it on some marble or your countertop, and it should retain its shape. At this point, pour the jelly into small glass jars, preferably sterilized unless you plan on eating it all in the next couple days, and let it cool. And while it cools, I will make yet another prediction that you will hit the like button and subscribe to Tasting History. But that is the future. For now, we go to the past of Nostradamus. Born in 1503 in Provence, France, Michel de Nostredame attended the University of Avignon when he was but 14 years old. Unfortunately, the school closed after 1 year due to an outbreak of plague. For 8 years, he traveled the countryside researching herbal remedies and finally became an apothecary. Then in 1529, he went back to school, this time at the University of Montpellier, to study medicine. Unfortunately, he was very quickly expelled when they found out that he had been a tradesman or an apothecary. It was kind of looked down upon. Though, he had also been making fun of some of the doctors who were teaching him, so that could actually have probably played into it. Though he still ended up going by doctor for pretty much all of his life, so either it was like a fake it till you make it thing, or he was actually reinstated and did graduate. There are conflicting sources out there from the time period, so who knows, but he did go by doctor. But whether he was a real doctor or not, he was actually very good at what he did. He was a lot more effective than most of the plague doctors at the time, probably because, while most of them were focused on bloodletting and covering patients in garlic, maybe as a way to scare off vampires during the bloodletting, he was all about cleanliness and removing the corpses of the dead from like the street and where he was working. Unfortunately, while he did become very well known as a plague doctor and was effective in treating it, his wife and children died of the disease in 1534. Now, while it was likely his desire to wash his hands and keep corpses out of his workspace that led him to be so effective at treating the plague, most of the credit at the time went to his rose lozenge, which was said to ward off the plague as well as treat mild cases. You know, if you're just having enough plague that you need to call out of work. Hey, Kevin, can you cover my shift today? My plague is acting up. Now, the instructions to make these lozenges are actually in the cookbook, and I wanted to make it until I read that it takes like 400 roses to make them, so that's not going to happen. It's also this recipe where the translation goes off, and one of the versions says that you need 400 red-black orchids. Go figure. Now, another thing that I won't be making from the book is a potion, which the ancients used for lovemaking. This potion, Nostradamus claims, was invented by Medea. Not that one. This one. The mythological Greek sorceress. Why won't I make it, you ask? Well, it's not for the reason that a 16th century German translator left it out of his version. Dear reader, at this point I have omitted from my translation into German the 18th chapter, because it teaches such things that are not fitting for a Christian or God-fearing man to know, and I therefore felt it better not to make any mention of them. Rather, my reason for not making it is because of some of the ingredients for which Nostradamus calls. Next, take the blood of 7 male sparrows, bled via the left wing, of ambergris, the weight of 57 barley seeds, 7 grains of musk, of the arms of an octopus, 1 eyelet from each, preserved and prepared in honey. Now, I am kind of curious, but I'm not that curious. But maybe it was this recipe that brought him to the attention of Catherine de' Medici, the Queen of France, though it could have been because of the recipes in the first half of the treatise, which were all for cosmetics. One he claims is such a wonderful concoction that if a member of the fairer sex were to begin to use this lotion at the age of 15, 20, or 25, for the rest of her life her complexion would remain exceptionally beautiful, so that even in her 60th year she would have the appearance of being only 20. If this guy was around today, he would be doing gangbusters on QVC. Now he also has recipes for removing sunspots, which I could probably use, as well as making your hair blonde and making your teeth whiter, though I would watch out for that one. Powder for whitening the teeth as white as ivory, however black and brown they may be. Take 3 drams each of crystal, flint, white marble, glass, and rock salt, 2 drams each of cuttlefish bone and sea snail shells, half a dram of fragmented pearls, and grind them down thoroughly. He says to rub this on your teeth until your gums recede, and then when the gums grow back, your teeth will be white. Don't do that. Now the second half of the treatise is filled with the recipes that you would expect, like the one that we're making today. He has recipes for quince jelly, candied orange peel, marzipan, and preserved pumpkins. Though even in these food recipes, you gotta watch out for that occasional pitfall, like one for sugar candy where he calls for it to be buried for 9 days in manure. But only 9 days. For you should also understand that if the sugar were to stay under the manure longer than 9 days and the manure was hot, the sugar would decandify because the steam from the manure contains moist fumes that would penetrate inside. Am I right in saying that it could not be worth taking the chance? I mean, no candy is that good. Now, he's actually really specific on what kind of sugar needs to be used. It's a fine white sugar, preferably from Venice. And I talk about this type of sugar in the episode on the history of sugar, which I will link to up here. It's really, really interesting. Now, unfortunately, for all of its merit, the treatise was pretty much forgotten by history, overshadowed by his more famous Les Prophéties, or the Prophecies. Now, those are not the topic of this video, though I do think it's interesting that he named the treatise The Prophecies of Nostradamus, and yet said that he hated being called a prophet. He actually eschewed the title several times during his life, one time writing, "I would not attribute to myself either the name or the role of a prophet. Now buy my book called The Prophecies." Kind of silly. But you don't have to be a prophet to know that this jelly should be cooled and ready to try. And here we are, 16th century cherry jelly a la Nostradamus. I got some bread to spread it on, but I think I'm first just gonna try to spoon it here. Oh, it's so weird. See, it does have like a give to it. It's very interesting. Bottoms up. There is that sour cherryness, which I'm actually not a fan of sour cherries. But there's enough sugar in there that it hits you and then it cuts it with the sweetness. He's kind of right that this should be for nobles because it just feels fancy. That flavor feels fancy. It feels so much more genuine than like a modern day jelly, because it doesn't feel saccharine or super sweet. It feels like you're eating the essence of those cherries, but softened in a way. That's really good. The thing is, those cherries are really expensive, but if you got some sour cherries laying around, or they grow somewhere where you are at and they're not super expensive, you should try this. It would be really good with like different desserts and like creamy cakes or like a chiffon cake or something like that. Just like let this be the flavor. Anyway, thank you to Nostradamus for the recipe and to Babbel for sponsoring this video. And make sure to follow me on Instagram, Tasting History with Max Miller, and I will see you next time on Tasting History. I do feel noble eating it. Noblesse oblige.